Fundamental laws of women's sexual nature. Introduction. Understanding the hidden blueprint of female sexuality. Female sexuality is a force, mysterious, powerful, fluid, and often misunderstood. For centuries, it has been misrepresented by folklore, suppressed by institutions, and oversimplified by pop psychology. While male sexual nature has traditionally been framed as straightforward and predictable, female sexual behavior has often been labeled complex or irrational, but complexity does not mean chaos. Beneath the surface, there are consistent patterns, biological imperatives, and deeply ingrained psychological triggers that, when understood, reveal an elegant set of laws governing women's sexual behavior. This book explores those fundamental laws, not as rigid rules, but as recurring principles that shape desire, attraction, decision-making, and emotional bonds in women. These laws are not moral judgments or prescriptions, they are descriptions of how things tend to work across cultures and through evolutionary time. Whether you're a curious woman seeking to understand your own patterns, a man trying to decode the emotional intricacies of a partner, or a professional navigating interpersonal dynamics, this book aims to offer clarity without condescension, depth without dogma. Why this book now? In a world of dating apps, shifting gender roles, and social media performance, the lines between authentic desire and external influence are increasingly blurred. Yet the underlying biology and evolutionary psychology that shaped our instincts haven't changed nearly as fast as our technologies. To make sense of the modern landscape, we must go back to the foundations. This book draws from evolutionary biology, neuroscience, attachment theory, and cultural analysis, but its real power lies in the human stories. Every law presented is paired with a real-world case study, a narrative showing how these principles manifest in the lived experience of women from different backgrounds, ages, and values. These case studies offer context, challenge stereotypes, and help bridge the gap between theory and lived reality. A word of caution and curiosity. This book is not an excuse to judge, stereotype, or reduce women to their biology. Nor is it an attempt to paint all women with the same brush. Individual differences matter. Context matters. But patterns matter, too, and when we ignore them, we stumble through relationships blindfolded. The laws discussed here are not about controlling female behavior. They're about understanding it, honoring its complexity, and learning how to navigate relationships, romantic or otherwise, with greater empathy and insight. What you'll learn. Why emotional context is more powerful than physical stimulation for many women. How biological cycles influence mate preference and risk-taking. Why many women are simultaneously drawn to different types of men for different needs. The role of hypergamy, social influence, and psychological safety in shaping sexual decisions. And much more, backed by stories that feel familiar, surprising, and real. By the end of this book, you'll have a working framework for interpreting female sexual behavior, not as a puzzle to solve, but as a natural system to understand. This is not about manipulation, it's about literacy, sexual, emotional, and psychological. Welcome to the hidden architecture of female desire. Chapter 1: Evolutionary Psychology and Female Sexuality. The Origins of Desire. To understand female sexuality, we must start with its deepest roots, not in modern culture, but in evolutionary history. Long before there were dating apps, romantic comedies, or societal expectations, there was the primal challenge of survival and reproduction. This basic truth shaped not only the physical evolution of women, but also the architecture of their psychology, particularly their sexual nature. The basics of evolutionary psychology. Evolutionary psychology is the study of how evolutionary pressures shaped human behavior. The theory holds that many of our preferences, fears, instincts, and emotional reactions are adaptive solutions to survival problems faced by our ancestors over thousands of generations. When it comes to sex, the biological stakes are higher for women than for men. A single sexual encounter could lead to pregnancy, with months of gestation, the risk of childbirth, and years of parental investment. For men, the cost of a sexual mistake might be negligible. For women, it could be life-altering. This fundamental asymmetry led women to evolve a more selective sexual strategy, one that balances risk, reward, and emotional security. The female reproductive investment. Biologically, women invest more in reproduction. Eggs are limited and costly. Women release a single egg each cycle. Men produce millions of sperm daily. Pregnancy is high risk. It limits mobility, increases nutritional needs, and exposes the woman to dangers. Child rearing is long-term. Human infants are helpless for years, requiring intensive caregiving. This is why, from an evolutionary standpoint, women evolved to be more discerning about their sexual partners. The man a woman chooses to mate with affects not only her health but her future survival and the success of her offspring. Strategic duality, security versus genetics. Over time, two core strategies emerged in female sexual behavior. 1. Long-term strategy, seeking a mate who can provide emotional support, resources, protection, and paternal investment. 2. Short-term strategy, pursuing strong genetic traits, dominance, physical health, confidence, often during peak fertility windows. This creates what scientists call strategic pluralism. Women can be simultaneously drawn to different types of men for different reasons, even subconsciously. The provider and the genetic alpha are not always the same person. This isn't deception, it's adaptation. Female sexuality evolved not just for reproduction, but for survival in an unpredictable environment. Case study: the split attraction dilemma. Background: Natalie is a 31-year-old marketing executive in a stable relationship with Ethan, a kind, emotionally supportive partner. He's a great communicator and wants children. But over the past year, she's been secretly attracted to a coworker named Marco, physically dominant, assertive, mysterious. They've never acted on it, but the tension is palpable. Natalie's words: "Ethan is who I should be with. My friends love him. My parents adore him. But sometimes I find myself fantasizing about Marco. It's not logical, just visceral." Interpretation: Natalie's experience is not rare, it reflects the dual mating strategy rooted in evolutionary pressures. Ethan represents long-term security, while Marco triggers short-term genetic attraction. Her conflict isn't a sign of immorality, it's a reflection of a deeper biological programming shaped long before society taught her how to behave. Modern conflicts with ancient wiring. Today's world is vastly different from the ancestral environment in which female sexuality evolved. We have contraception, economic independence, and cultural shifts toward gender equality. But evolution moves slowly. The emotional instincts and sexual reflexes that developed over millennia are still with us. This can create inner conflict. A woman may rationally choose a dependable partner, but feel emotionally or physically drawn to someone who matches ancient, biologically encoded triggers for genetic fitness, height, symmetry, dominance, risk-taking. Understanding these instincts doesn't mean surrendering to them, but it does help explain why certain desires feel so powerful, even when they go against logic, social expectation, or long-term goals. Understanding the ancient code behind modern attraction. When a woman feels an inexplicable pull toward one man over another, despite what logic says, despite what culture demands, she is often responding to something far older than her conscious mind, an evolutionary script encoded in the deepest layers of human psychology. While the surface of female desire is shaped by individual preferences, personal experiences, and cultural narratives, its roots dig into ancient soil fertilized by millions of years of reproductive strategy and survival necessity. This chapter lays the foundation for the rest of the book by exploring how evolutionary psychology shapes women's sexual behavior, desires, and mate choices in ways that still govern modern relationships, often invisibly, but powerfully. 1. The basics of evolutionary psychology. Evolutionary psychology is the study of how the human mind evolved to solve problems related to survival and reproduction. It argues that many of our modern emotional and behavioral patterns were shaped not for comfort or equality, but for fitness, the ability to pass on genes. From this lens, female sexual behavior isn't random, weak, or mysterious. It's adaptive. Over evolutionary time, women develop behaviors that help them select high-quality mates, secure resources, protect themselves and their offspring, maximize long-term reproductive success. Each of these goals demanded different strategies in different environments, which is why modern women often experience competing desires or internal conflicts, not because they are confused, but because they are navigating a legacy of competing adaptive needs. 2. Sexual selection and female strategy. In all sexually reproducing species, the sex that invests more in offspring tends to be more selective about mates. For humans, that's overwhelmingly women. Pregnancy is biologically expensive. Childbirth is dangerous. Child rearing is time-consuming. Because of this, ancestral women could not afford to be careless with their partners. This gave rise to sexual selectivity, a hallmark of female desire. Women evolved to prefer traits that signaled genetic fitness, protection, and long-term provisioning, traits like physical strength and symmetry, good genes, status and dominance, access to resources, loyalty and protectiveness, parental investment. But here's the twist: no single mate could consistently offer all three. This led to the emergence of dual mating strategies, where women might unconsciously seek different traits in different men. We'll cover this deeply in a later chapter. 3. Short-term versus long-term mating goals. From an evolutionary standpoint, women had two primary mating goals. Short-term mating, accessing high-quality genes or immediate emotional physical gratification. Long-term mating, securing stable protection, resources, and investment for offspring. In short-term contexts, women might be drawn to alpha traits, confidence, physical attractiveness, charisma, sexual dominance. These signal high genetic fitness but not necessarily commitment. In long-term contexts, they may favor beta traits, kindness, loyalty, emotional intelligence, dependability. These offer safety, parenting potential, and emotional security. Modern women often feel drawn toward one man for chemistry and another for compatibility. That's not a flaw, it's an evolutionary tension playing out in modern time. 4. The hidden role of ovulation. One of the most fascinating findings in evolutionary psychology is how ovulation subtly influences female desire. During peak fertility, women are more likely to feel attracted to masculine faces, deeper voices, and dominant behavior. They may prefer risk-takers, bad boys, and men with higher testosterone markers. They engage in more sexual thoughts, dress more provocatively, and are more responsive to flirtation. This behavior shifts again after ovulation, with increased preference for nurturing, emotionally available, and stable partners. In other words, even when a woman isn't consciously trying to conceive, her brain and body are still playing out ancient reproductive scripts. Emotional context, a key adaptation. Unlike men, who evolved to respond primarily to visual and physical cues, women evolved to prioritize emotional and contextual cues in their sexual arousal. Why? Because for most of human history, the cost of a poor sexual choice was higher for women: pregnancy, abandonment, social shaming, or even death. Therefore, female arousal became selectively gated, triggered not just by looks or physical stimulation, but by trust, status, emotional safety, connection, storytelling, and imagination. This is why women often require more psychological build-up and emotional foreplay to reach a state of arousal. It's not weakness, it's adaptive caution. The power of hypergamy. A central concept in evolutionary psychology is hypergamy, the tendency for women to emate upward in status, wealth, or strength. Why does this matter? Because hypergamy isn't shallow or materialistic. It's rooted in survival. In tribal settings, the man with higher status often meant more access to food, better protection, greater influence in the group. Even today, hypergamy shows up when women prefer men who are taller, earn more, or display higher ambition, not necessarily because of greed, but because their psychology is still attuned to ancestral conditions where such traits meant better chances for survival. Evolution doesn't care about fairness. One of the hardest truths about evolutionary psychology is this: it does not care about modern ideals like fairness, equality, or romantic fantasy. It cares about what works to pass on genes. So while we live in a time of moral progress and gender equality, and rightfully so, our evolved psychology still speaks with an older voice. Women may say they want a nice guy, but feel drawn to dominant men. They may crave emotional intimacy but become infatuated with aloofness. These are not contradictions. They're evolutionary mechanics being played out in a modern world that has changed faster than our biology. Real-world case study, the paradox of two lovers. Consider Elena, a 32-year-old nurse who was dating two men. Adam was reliable, emotionally available, and wanted a future together. Leah was unpredictable, assertive, and sexually magnetic, but emotionally unavailable. Elena felt deeply confused. Her rational mind favored Adam. Her body and emotions were pulled to Leo. After learning about evolutionary psychology, particularly dual mating strategy and ovulatory influence, she began to see her experience not as a personal failing, but as the collision between two ancient drives, security and stimulation. With this understanding, she made a conscious decision to invest in a relationship that could offer long-term safety while openly exploring her own needs for erotic intensity within it, through communication, shared fantasies, and new experiences. Why this matters? Understanding evolutionary psychology isn't about excusing bad behavior or reducing love to biology. It's about removing shame from natural instincts, seeing patterns where we once saw chaos, communicating better in romantic relationships, making conscious decisions based on awareness, not confusion. Chapter 1: The Evolutionary Psychology Shaping Women's Desire. Decoding Ancient Drives in the Modern World. Introduction: Ancient Drives, Modern Desires. We live in a world of dating apps, gender equality movements, and hyperconnected social lives, yet the roots of desire haven't evolved as quickly as society. A woman's sexual instincts weren't crafted in the age of Instagram, they were forged during thousands of generations where survival and reproduction were the only priorities that mattered. This chapter reveals how evolutionary psychology provides the blueprint for understanding female sexual behavior. It uncovers how women's desires are shaped not just by who's attractive, but by what worked for survival, and how those deep instincts still direct modern romance in subtle, surprising ways. Evolutionary psychology, the mind a survival machine. Evolutionary psychology operates on a simple premise: our brains evolved to solve the problems our ancestors faced. These problems included finding food, avoiding predators, building alliances, selecting mates, raising offspring. Desire, arousal, jealousy, and even sexual shame are not random feelings. They are adaptive mechanisms, psychological tools shaped by evolution to optimize survival and reproductive success. A woman's mind, like a man's, is equipped with ancient algorithms. But her sexual strategies have been deeply shaped by the unique biological risks she faces: pregnancy, childbirth, lactation, and childcare. Thus, her mating psychology is inherently more selective, strategic, and context-sensitive. 2. The asymmetry of reproductive cost. The foundation of sexual selection lies in the unequal investment in reproduction. Men can theoretically father hundreds of children with minimal physical investment. Women can carry and raise only a few, with massive physical and emotional costs. This biological asymmetry produced male competition for access to females, female choosiness to select the best possible mates. Women's sexual behavior is therefore shaped not by desire alone, but by risk management. Each sexual encounter is evaluated, consciously or unconsciously, through filters of trust, protection, status, and emotional resonance. The dual mating strategy theory, alpha seed versus beta need. One of the most provocative insights in evolutionary psychology is the dual mating strategy hypothesis. It posits that women, across evolution, faced a trade-off. Mate with genetically superior men, alpha traits, for better offspring. Secure long-term investment, beta traits, from stable, nurturing men for survival. These needs often conflicted. Some men were good at one, but not both. As a result, women evolved to prefer high testosterone, dominant, and symmetrical men during fertile phases. Favor dependable, kind, emotionally available men for long-term bonding and parenting. Modern implication. This evolutionary tension explains why a woman might feel intense attraction toward one man, but not trust him, and feel deeply safe with another, but not sexually excited. She is experiencing the pull of two ancient drives, often without realizing it. 4. The impact of ovulation on desire and behavior. While women are less visibly affected by their hormones than men, their sexual psychology is highly cyclical. Studies show that during ovulation, days 12 to 16 of a typical cycle, women rate masculine facial features as more attractive. Their libido increases. They are more likely to flirt or initiate sex. They may feel less satisfied with long-term partners if those partners lack alpha traits. After ovulation, the focus shifts toward safety, emotional closeness, lower sexual risk-taking. Key insight. Female sexual behavior is not erratic, it is strategically adaptive. Evolution didn't reward consistency. It rewarded flexibility, a cycle that prioritizes genes at one phase and security at another. 5. Hypergamy, the desire to mate up. Hypergamy refers to the tendency to seek a partner of higher status, intelligence, or resources. This doesn't mean women are gold diggers. It means that over millennia, choosing mates who were capable providers, protectors, and leaders increased survival odds. In tribal societies, higher status males had better access to food, allies, and safety. Their offspring had better survival rates. Mating with them meant stronger social protection. In modern times, hypergamy persists, though its signs have evolved. Women may favor men with confidence, ambition, influence, or leadership. They may feel emotionally disengaged from men who lack perceived drive or status. It's not about materialism. It's about evolved instinct, and this instinct still influences relationship dynamics, mate selection, and even dissatisfaction in modern marriages. Sexual arousal, why context matters more for women. Evolution wired male desire to respond to visual cues, youth, fertility markers, body shape. But female desire is more complex and contextual because the stakes were higher. Women evolved to ask, is this man safe? Is he emotionally consistent? Will he stay or abandon me? How does he fit in my social world? As a result, emotional storytelling, character, tone, and environment play a much greater role in female arousal. Why this matters? This is why erotica, romance novels, and fantasy-based media are more appealing to women. They activate imagination and context, which are core to their arousal patterns. Female intrasexual competition and mate guarding. Evolution didn't just shape how women respond to men, it shaped how they respond to other women. Because high-quality males were, and still are, limited resources, women evolved. Mate guarding instincts, jealousy, suspicion. Intrasexual competition, appearance enhancement, social signaling, gossip. Women compete, often subtly, through beauty, a proxy for fertility. Status, social hierarchy. Behavioral cues, modesty, dominance, intelligence. This competition isn't toxic by nature, it's adaptive. And understanding it can reduce guilt or confusion around competitiveness and comparison. Desire needs a home, and that home is safety. For many women, emotional safety is not a luxury, it is the foundation of sexual desire. Unlike the stereotypical portrayal of spontaneous, ever-present arousal, a woman's sexuality often blooms in environments where her nervous system feels regulated, her heart feels protected, and her mind feels free. In this chapter, we explore how emotional safety functions as the ignition switch for female desire, and why neglecting it often leads to frustration, miscommunication, and unmet needs in intimacy. 1. The biology of safety. The female nervous system is particularly attuned to safety cues, both real and perceived. From an evolutionary standpoint, this makes perfect sense. Pregnancy and vulnerability during mating meant women evolved with mechanisms to detect threat and ensure survival. When a woman feels unsafe, emotionally, physically, or socially, her brain prioritizes self-protection. the sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight mode, kicks in, reducing blood flow to the sexual organs and suppressing desire. Conversely, when she feels emotionally safe, her parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and connects mode, becomes dominant, allowing arousal, trust, and surrender. This biological truth underscores a central law of women's sexual nature. Sexual openness is not purely hormonal, it is neurological, emotional, and relational. 2. Trust as a prerequisite to desire. Trust is not simply about believing someone won't harm you. In intimate contexts, it's about feeling emotionally held, seen, and accepted. For many women, true sexual desire begins after they've felt heard without being judged, touched with intention, not entitlement, valued for their full self, not just their body. When a woman doesn't trust her partner emotionally, her body responds accordingly, tightening, retreating, or dissociating. And when she does trust, her sexuality often deepens, becoming more playful, open, and exploratory. 3. Emotional intimacy versus physical initiation. One common misunderstanding arises when men initiate physical intimacy hoping it will lead to emotional connection. For many women, however, the reverse is true. Emotional connection is the gateway to physical openness. This can lead to mismatches. He initiates touch to build closeness. She needs closeness first to be open to touch. Understanding this difference doesn't place blame, it reveals the delicate choreography of intimacy and the importance of emotional foreplay. 4. Vulnerability, the hidden aphrodisiac. To feel desire, a woman must feel safe enough to be vulnerable. This includes expressing her needs without fear of dismissal, exploring fantasies without shame, allowing herself to be fully seen, emotionally and physically. However, vulnerability requires more than a willing heart, it needs a trustworthy environment. If she's criticized, mocked, rushed, or compared, the walls go up. Her sexuality becomes guarded, performative, or shut down entirely. But when she feels emotionally nourished, her sexuality often becomes bolder, richer, and more generous. Because she's no longer performing, she's participating. 5. Attachment styles and sexual availability. Attachment theory provides powerful insight into female sexual behavior. Depending on early life experiences and adult relationship patterns, women, like men, may develop secure attachment, open to intimacy, clear communication, consistent desire. Anxious attachment, hyperfocus on approval, sex used to gain closeness. Avoidant attachment, difficulty trusting, may dissociate from sexual needs. These patterns influence how and when desire arises. For example, a securely attached woman feels safe enough to explore and initiate sex without fear of rejection. An anxiously attached woman may confuse sexual attention with emotional love, leading to overgiving. An avoidantly attached woman may resist sex, not because of low libido, but due to fear of closeness or vulnerability. Understanding a woman's attachment style can illuminate why she may crave intimacy one moment and withdraw the next. 6. Safety beyond the relationship. It's crucial to recognize that emotional safety isn't just about the partner, it's also about the woman's inner world. Many women carry internalized shame, trauma, or societal conditioning that creates an inner sense of danger around sexuality. Examples include fear of being labeled promiscuous, religious guilt, past abuse or boundary violations, body image issues. In these cases, even the safest partner cannot override the need for internal healing. Emotional safety becomes a self-generated requirement as well as a relational one. 7. What creates emotional safety? While every woman is different, consistent themes emerge when asking women what makes them feel safe enough to desire. Presence, a partner who is fully there, not distracted or detached. Consistency, emotional reliability, not hot and cold games. Kindness, being treated with gentleness, even in disagreement. Consent, respecting boundaries without pressure. Communication, feeling heard, not just tolerated. It's not about perfection, it's about attunement. When a woman senses you're with her in the moment, not using her to soothe your own needs, she naturally becomes more open. 8. The masculine role in creating safety. While women are responsible for their own healing and expression, men can play a powerful role in supporting emotional safety. Learn to listen without fixing. Validate emotions without becoming defensive. Lead with presence, not pressure. Be patient, not passively waiting, but actively cultivating trust. When a man becomes emotionally safe, he doesn't need to chase desire, it comes to him. Desire doesn't disappear in women. It hides when it doesn't feel safe. And when emotional safety becomes a shared priority in relationships, sex evolves from duty to delight, from obligation to invitation. In the end, emotional safety is not just about what's absent, fear, pressure, judgment, it's about what's present, care, connection, and genuine presence. This isn't weakness, it's the strength of feminine sexuality. It doesn't surrender to threat. It only opens where it's honored. Real case study, the evolutionary puzzle of Monica. Monica, 35, was married to a gentle, loving husband. He was a good provider, thoughtful, and loyal. Yet after 10 years, she found herself emotionally and sexually distant from him. She began to fantasize about a coworker who was assertive, unpredictable, and flirtatious. She couldn't understand why. She didn't want to hurt her husband, but felt inexplicably drawn to this other man. Through therapy and self-education in evolutionary psychology, Monica discovered her attraction to the coworker reflected short-term, alpha archetype stimulation. Her emotional disengagement at home was driven by a lack of polarity and erotic energy. She didn't want to abandon her marriage, she wanted to reawaken her inner animal. By communicating her needs and reintroducing novelty and dominance play into her relationship, Monica found a path to sexual reconnection without self-blame. Why evolutionary psychology doesn't equal destiny. A critical disclaimer: evolution explains tendencies, not absolutes. Women are not slaves to biology. Desire is influenced by culture, choice, personality, trauma, and experience. Evolutionary psychology gives us the framework, but each woman still paints her own canvas. This knowledge isn't about controlling desire, justifying infidelity, limiting autonomy. It's about understanding what's beneath the surface, reducing self-judgment, communicating more honestly, making more aligned choices. Conclusion: unlocking the code. Women's sexual nature is not chaotic, it is calculated. Calculated not by logic, but by adaptive intelligence passed down over millennia. The need for safety? An evolutionary reflex. The pull toward confident, dominant men. A signal of ancient selection pressure. The craving for emotional foreplay and fantasy? A natural design. Understanding these instincts doesn't weaken mystery, it deepens it. It allows both women and men to approach relationships not with naive idealism or frustrated confusion, but with informed compassion. In summary, female desire is the product of evolutionary pressures shaped by survival and reproduction. Women evolved to be selective, emotionally attuned, and context-driven in sexual behavior. Short-term and long-term mating strategies can conflict, but both have adaptive value. Hormonal changes, emotional safety, and hypergamy all play critical roles. Modern attraction is still rooted in ancient instincts, even when modern culture evolves faster. Understanding these forces is not about control, it's about clarity. When women understand where their desires come from, they can stop feeling conflicted and start feeling empowered. When men understand it, they stop resenting it and start respecting it. Key takeaways. Female sexual selectivity evolved due to high reproductive investment. Emotional and contextual factors heavily influence female desire. Dual mating strategies are biologically rooted, not morally deviant. Evolutionary psychology helps decode modern conflicts in attraction and sexuality. Chapter 2: Hormones, Biology, and the Cycle of Desire. The invisible rhythms that shape female attraction and arousal. In discussions of human sexuality, biology often gets downplayed in favor of cultural or psychological explanations. But when it comes to women's sexual nature, biology, particularly hormonal rhythms, isn't just relevant, it's foundational. These hormonal shifts don't just affect reproductive functions, they shape emotional responses, sexual appetite, partner preferences, risk tolerance, and even behavior in subtle but powerful ways. To understand female desire, one must first understand the biological clockwork running behind the scenes. The menstrual cycle and sexuality, a 28-day pattern. The average menstrual cycle is about 28 days long, divided into 4 main phases: the menstrual phase, the follicular phase, ovulation, and the luteal phase. Each is driven by hormonal changes, primarily fluctuations in estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and luteinizing hormone LH, which have direct psychological and behavioral effects. Let's explore how these phases influence female sexuality. 1. Follicular phase, days 1 to 13. The build-up begins with menstruation. Estrogen starts to rise. Women may feel more energetic, social, and open to novelty. Libido gradually increases. Sexual implication: women begin to feel more confident and flirtatious as estrogen rises. Subtle cues of attraction start to emerge, body language becomes more inviting, clothing choices may shift, and attention to appearance may increase. 2. Ovulation, day 14 plus or minus the fertile window. Estrogen peaks, testosterone and LH surge. Ovulation occurs, highest fertility window. Libido peaks sharply. Preference often shifts toward more dominant, masculine features and high testosterone behaviors. Sexual implication: women are biologically primed for reproduction. Studies show they are more drawn to alpha traits, strong jawlines, deeper voices, risk-taking behavior, and confidence. There's also an increase in sexual initiative and sometimes more openness to short-term flings, especially when in emotionally unsatisfying relationships. 3. Luteal phase, days 15 to 28. The wind down. Progesterone rises to prepare for possible pregnancy. Libido tends to drop, mood may stabilize or dip, especially if PMS occurs. Women become more relationship-focused, emotionally sensitive, and risk-averse. Sexual implication: preference shifts from boldness to reliability. Women often feel a stronger emotional connection with long-term partners and may seek reassurance, intimacy, and emotional closeness. 4. Menstruation, days 1 to 5 of cycle. Hormone levels drop sharply. Energy and libido often decrease. Some women report heightened emotional sensitivity or inward focus. Sexual implication: while sexual activity doesn't necessarily stop, arousal often requires more emotional connection or comfort. Some women, however, report increased orgasm intensity due to heightened blood flow and sensitivity. The science behind it. Hormonal research shows that testosterone correlates with sexual desire in both sexes, but women experience its peak during ovulation, right when the body is most fertile. This is not coincidence, it's a biological imperative designed by evolution to maximize reproductive success. What's more fascinating is how these hormonal shifts subtly shape behavior and even mate preference, often below the level of conscious awareness. Women may not always recognize these changes, but the data show consistent patterns across cultures and age groups. Case study: the week she wanted him most. Subject: Jenna, 32, corporate lawyer. Jenna had been in a stable, long-term relationship with her partner, Alex. They shared values, a mortgage, and Sunday morning routines. But she found herself occasionally fantasizing about someone else, particularly a colleague named Jason who was assertive, charismatic, and decidedly not her type on paper. She began tracking her mood using a hormone tracking app and noticed a startling pattern: every month, like clockwork, she found Jason more attractive around the middle of her cycle, during ovulation. She felt more confident, flirtatious, and drawn to bold, dominant energy. After ovulation passed, the attraction faded, and she felt grounded and more appreciative of Alex's emotional steadiness. Jenna's experience is not uncommon. It doesn't mean she loved her partner less, it simply meant her body was responding to evolutionary cues embedded in her biology. Once she understood the rhythm, she used it to strengthen her connection with Alex, scheduling romantic getaways and intimate time during her peak libido window. The awareness itself was empowering. Cultural implications. Modern women live in a world that often demands emotional consistency, but the body doesn't operate on consistency, it runs on cycles. A woman might desire excitement and unpredictability one week, and emotional warmth and connection the next. These fluctuations are not contradictions, they are complementary aspects of a dynamic biological system. Takeaways. 1. Women's sexual desire is not linear, it moves in waves, influenced by hormones. 2. The fertile window often brings a spike in libido, risk tolerance, and preference for dominant traits. 3. Emotional connection becomes more significant during low libido phases. 4. Understanding these cycles can help partners anticipate needs, reduce conflict, and build deeper intimacy. Understanding a woman's hormonal rhythm doesn't mean reducing her to biology. It means respecting her complexity and learning to speak the language of her body as well as her mind. In the next chapter, we will explore the deep evolutionary forces behind mate selectivity, why women are more discerning than men, and how this impacts everything from dating to long-term commitment. Chapter 3: The Role of Hypergamy. A woman's sexual nature is not opportunistic, it is strategic. And in that strategy lies the root of hypergamy. What is hypergamy? Hypergamy is the tendency to seek a partner of equal or higher status, social, financial, intellectual, or physical, especially when considering long-term relationships or reproduction. The word comes from the Greek hyper, over, above, and gamos, marriage, traditionally describing the practice of marrying up. But in sexual nature, hypergamy goes deeper than a marriage contract. It is an evolutionary strategy. If a woman is biologically designed to carry a child for 9 months and invest years in rearing it, she is more selective and more strategic about who gets to contribute to that process. Her body, consciously or not, is asking, will this man improve the survival odds and future prospects of my offspring? That doesn't mean women are gold diggers. It means they are wired for risk minimization and quality optimization. Hypergamy in evolutionary context. Throughout human history, women's reproductive success hinged on partnering with men who could 1. Provide resources, food, shelter, protection. 2. Demonstrate high genetic fitness, health, intelligence, dominance. 3. Offer commitment and emotional investment. Hypergamy emerged as a biological insurance policy. A woman who mated with a more dominant, resourceful man had a higher chance of producing healthy offspring who survived and thrived. But hypergamy doesn't only seek money or brute strength. It seeks relative value, a man who is perceived to be of higher value than her current options, especially within her environment and peer group. Hypergamy in modern society. In today's world, where women have their own careers, access to birth control, and social independence, some argue that hypergamy should be irrelevant. But in fact, female selectivity has become even more refined. Why? Because women now expect a partner who is not just equal, but better, in ambition, charisma, emotional intelligence, status, or sexual polarity. In short, if I'm leveling up, he should be, too, or I'll outgrow him. Dating apps have amplified this by giving women access to more perceived high-value men than ever before. At the same time, it has increased dissatisfaction among average men, creating tension in the modern mating market. Perceived versus objective value. Hypergamy is often driven by perception, not reality. A man may not be wealthy, but if he exhibits traits associated with ambition, confidence, and potential, he may still be seen as an upward. This is why confidence, style, humor, and social influence can trigger hypergamous attraction even in the absence of traditional status markers. The hypergamy dilemma. A woman may face 2 types of attraction. The man who offers emotional safety and stability, lower risk. The man who offers excitement, status, or raw attraction, higher reward. When the two are not found in the same person, internal conflict arises. Some settle. Some cheat. Some wait. Others oscillate. Understanding this helps explain behaviors that often confuse both men and women. Use case study, The Professional Woman's Dilemma. Subject, Amora, 34, corporate executive, unmarried. Background, Amora is successful, confident, and attractive. She earns a six-figure salary and holds a senior leadership role in a tech firm. She has had several relationships, most of them with men she described as sweet but uninspiring. Recently, she ended a 2-year relationship with Daniel, a school teacher who deeply loved her. Conflict. While Daniel was kind and emotionally available, Amora increasingly felt a lack of spark. She often found herself attracted to Jason, a charismatic entrepreneur she met at networking events. Jason was driven, dominant, and unpredictable, but inconsistent. They had a brief sexual relationship before he ghosted her. Reflection. In therapy, Amora admitted she felt guilty for leaving Daniel, who was a good man. But she also confessed that her sexual and emotional desire for Jason felt more real. Interpretation through hypergamy. Amora's hypergamous instinct wasn't purely financial, it was energetic and status-based. Jason's ambition and dominance triggered an attraction Daniel couldn't match, despite his virtues. Amora subconsciously prioritized potential legacy and sexual polarity over security. Outcome. After emotional turbulence and introspection, Amora realized she was pursuing an ideal that combined Jason's ambition with Daniel's character. She didn't want to choose one extreme or the other, she wanted integration. Her next relationship was with a business consultant who had both emotional depth and career ambition. Takeaways. Hypergamy is not about greed, but about optimization and security. Its relative, context, culture, and self-perception shape its expression. Men who develop status, emotional intelligence, and polarity simultaneously are more likely to satisfy hypergamous instincts. Women who understand their own hypergamous impulses are more capable of making conscious, balanced relationship decisions, not just reactive ones. Hypergamy isn't the enemy of love. It's the evolutionary editor of female desire. Certainly. Below is Chapter 4, The Law of Emotional Primacy from your book Fundamental Laws of Women's Sexual Nature with Use Case Studies. It follows a structured format, introducing the law, exploring the theory, and ending with a real-world use case. Chapter 4, The Law of Emotional Primacy. For many women, arousal begins not in the body, but in the story. The law explained. The law of emotional primacy states that women's sexual desire is more strongly influenced by emotional context, psychological safety, and narrative meaning than by raw physical stimuli. While both men and women can enjoy physical pleasure, the ignition switch for female desire often lies deeper, within the emotions, imagination, and interpersonal connection. Where male sexual arousal is often linear and visually triggered, female arousal tends to be context-dependent, multi-layered, and shaped by how she feels, who she's with, and what that experience means. This doesn't mean women are less sexual than men, it means their sexuality is less compartmentalized and more integrated into the broader emotional landscape. If a woman feels emotionally unsafe, unseen, or stressed, her capacity for sexual arousal often shuts down, even in the presence of physical attraction. Biological and psychological foundations. 1. Neuroscience and arousal. Brain imaging studies, like those from Dr. Meredith Chivas and Dr. Helen Fisher, show that for many women, regions of the brain associated with emotional regulation and relational thinking are more active during sexual arousal than in men. Female desire is not just sensory, it is deeply neurological and affective. 2. Attachment theory. Women with secure attachment styles often experience deeper emotional arousal through connection, while those with anxious or avoidant styles may either suppress or intensify desire based on relational dynamics. Emotional primacy means that the quality of the relationship affects sexual interest, not just the physical features of the partner. 3. Evolutionary logic. From an evolutionary standpoint, emotional attunement may have been a signal of long-term mate value. A man who could emotionally connect might also be more likely to invest, protect, and parent. Emotional sensitivity becomes an adaptive turn-on, not just a cultural preference. Cultural confusion, why doesn't she want me anymore? Many men express confusion when a once sexual relationship cools down despite there being no overt conflict. Often, what's missing isn't physical attraction, it's emotional resonance. She doesn't feel seen. She doesn't feel heard. She doesn't feel safe to be herself. This doesn't make her fickle or unfair, it reflects the law of emotional primacy. When the emotional environment deteriorates, sexual desire often fades with it. Modern implications. Porn versus romance novels. The porn industry targets male visual triggers, the romance novel industry, and fan fiction, targets emotional and narrative triggers. The difference isn't accidental, it's neurological. Long-term relationships. Over time, physical novelty fades. What keeps desire alive for many women is emotional novelty, deepening intimacy, shared vulnerability, or a sense of personal growth within the relationship. Misdiagnosed low libido. In many cases, a woman's low libido is actually low emotional fulfillment. Rekindling emotional connection can reactivate sexual desire. Case study: Lisa and the therapist who wasn't. Background. Lisa, 34, was in a 5-year relationship with Mike, a dependable man who provided stability, affection, and support. But their sex life had dwindled to near zero. They had no major fights. Mike was kind and attentive. Still, Lisa felt emotionally flat, and her desire disappeared. Then she met Kevin at a work seminar. Kevin wasn't conventionally more attractive than Mike, but he listened to Lisa in a way that made her feel deeply understood. They spoke for hours about goals, fears, childhood memories. She felt alive around him. 2 weeks later, Lisa cheated, something she never imagined herself doing. Analysis? Kevin didn't steal the Lisa. He activated her emotionally in a way that rekindled her sexuality. Mike loved her, but their emotional intimacy had stagnated. Lisa's affair wasn't about sex, it was about feeling emotionally alive, validated, and seen. Lisa later told a therapist, "It wasn't that I wanted sex. I just wanted to feel something again." That's emotional primacy in action. What this law teaches. Emotional attunement is not a bonus, it's a prerequisite for many women's sexual desire. Men who prioritize emotional connection often see better sexual outcomes than those who rely solely on attraction or performance. Women must also recognize this within themselves. When desire fades, it may be a cue to reconnect emotionally, not just physically. Questions for reflection. In what ways do you, or your partner, experience emotional connection as a gateway to sexual intimacy? When was the last time you felt truly emotionally seen, and how did it affect your desire? How do emotional safety and emotional excitement balance in your relationships? Next up, Chapter 5, The Law of Selective Desire. While emotions guide much of a woman's sexual openness, not all partners get through the gate. In the next chapter, we'll explore why women are biologically wired to be more selective in their sexual choices, and how this has shaped everything from courtship to conflict. Chapter 5, The Law of Selective Desire. Women are not less sexual, they are more selective. Understanding the law. One of the most fundamental truths about female sexual nature is that women are biologically wired to be selective. This is not cultural conditioning, it's evolutionary logic. From a purely biological perspective, sex is a higher stakes act for women than for men. For most of evolutionary history, one sexual encounter could result in pregnancy, which would tie a woman to nearly a year of gestation followed by years of caregiving. For men, reproduction could be achieved with minimal investment. This asymmetry drove women to evolve filters, psychological, emotional, and sensory, to evaluate potential mates. This does not mean women have a lower sex drive or are less sexual. On the contrary, research consistently shows women are highly erotic beings with deep capacity for arousal, fantasy, and pleasure. The key difference is in how desire is activated and who qualifies as a trigger. What female selectivity looks like. Selective desire shows up in many forms. Stringent attraction criteria. Most women find only a small percentage of men sexually attractive. This is consistent in dating app data, where women swipe right far less often than men. Contextual arousal: a woman may not feel attraction immediately, but can develop it over time through emotional bonding, status signaling, or shared experience. Discuss sensitivity: women are more sensitive to signs of illness, poor hygiene, or low status, which quickly extinguish desire. High standards in long-term mates: women tend to demand more in terms of ambition, intelligence, and stability in partners they consider for relationships. This doesn't mean that women never act impulsively or casually, it means that even those decisions are often filtered through a subconscious assessment of value, safety, and compatibility. Scientific support. Evolutionary biology: studies show women prioritize markers of genetic fitness, like symmetry or confidence, and resource potential, like competence or dominance. Psychological data: research from Buss and Schmidt, 1993, highlights that while men tend to prioritize availability and appearance in short-term mating, women filter based on a multidimensional matrix: personality, social proof, emotional tone, and long-term viability. Neuroscience: the female brain processes arousal through areas associated with emotion, memory, and meaning, rather than raw physicality alone. Case study: the interview filter. Subject: Maya, 29, software engineer. Setting: a corporate leadership retreat. Summary: Maya attended a professional retreat where she met two men, Ethan, charming and flirtatious, and Daniel, quiet and steady. Ethan complimented her instantly and made his interest obvious. Daniel barely spoke the first day, but gradually joined deeper conversations about psychology and motivation. On the final night, a team challenge paired Maya with Daniel. They worked intensely for hours. He was respectful, insightful, and subtly assertive. That night, she felt a wave of desire, sudden but undeniable. It was like something just clicked. He hadn't made a move, hadn't flirted at all, but I realized I was extremely attracted to him. It wasn't about looks, it was how he showed up. They later dated for nearly 2 years. Analysis: Maya's attraction wasn't immediate. It was filtered through social observation, emotional resonance, and functional competence. Daniel passed the interview, not in a literal sense, but through unconscious evaluation based on Maya's values and instincts. This is a classic display of selective desire: slow burning, deeply conditional, and highly contextual. Male versus female desire: a contrast. To better understand the law of selective desire, consider the contrast. Trait: male sexual response, female sexual response. Visual trigger: highly sensitive, moderately sensitive. Context sensitivity: low, high. Emotional prerequisites: often optional, often essential. Social status impact: minor to moderate significant. Discuss threshold: lower, higher. Attraction build-up speed: often instant, often gradual. This doesn't mean every woman or every man fits neatly into these boxes, but these general tendencies help explain why female desire seems slower or more elusive. It's simply more discerning. Practical implications. For men, understand that attraction may take time. Don't mistake disinterest for low libido. Emotional intelligence and social awareness go further than surface confidence. Rejection isn't always about you, it's often about her internal filtering system. For women, acknowledge your selectivity as power, not as a flaw. Don't feel guilt for rejecting options that don't feel right. Your instincts are working as designed. Understand that intense chemistry doesn't always mean suitability, it may bypass filters temporarily. Conclusion. The law of selective desire reminds us that female arousal is not about lack of interest, it's about intelligent discernment. Women are not colder or more reserved by nature, they are more evaluative by necessity. Their sexual systems are built to detect value, assess risk, and align attraction with both emotion and environment. In a world that often demands instant gratification, female selectivity may seem like a puzzle, but it's actually one of nature's most refined designs. Chapter 6: The Law of Social Influence. Her desire doesn't exist in a vacuum. It listens to the room. Overview. Human beings are social creatures, but for women, whose evolutionary survival has historically depended on cooperation and social inclusion, the impact of social influence on sexuality is profound. The law of social influence posits that a woman's sexual behavior, preferences, and decisions are significantly shaped by her social environment, friends, family, cultural narratives, online communities, and even imagined social judgment. While men's sexual desire tends to be more visually and biologically triggered, women's desire is often filtered through perceived social acceptability, peer feedback, and internalized cultural values. In other words, she may feel attracted, but whether she acts on it is shaped by what she believes others would think. The science behind it. Numerous studies in psychology and neuroscience confirm that female sexual behavior is more context-sensitive than male behavior. Brain imaging has shown that women's sexual arousal is more easily disrupted by negative environmental cues, like judgment, shame, or social disapproval. Researchers have also found that women are more likely than men to report peer conformity in romantic and sexual decisions. From adolescence onward, many women subconsciously filter their desire through a reputation management lens, a cognitive mechanism evolved to maintain social standing in a tribe where exclusion meant vulnerability. In modern times, this manifests in questions like, what will my friends think if I date him? Will I be judged if I make the first move? Is this the kind of guy my mother would approve of? Would this post make me look desperate? Even if the attraction is strong, the social cost-benefit analysis often determines whether desire becomes action. Social proof and mate value. Another key aspect of this law is social proof. A woman may feel more attracted to a man after seeing that other women desire him, a phenomenon sometimes called mate copying. This isn't superficial, it's deeply biological. If others want him, he must have qualities worth passing on. In environments of uncertainty, social signals become shortcuts for decision-making. This means attraction can increase after social validation rather than before. Use case study, the popular opinion shift. Name, Sophie, 27, marketing professional. Location, Melbourne, Australia. Situation, Sophie met Ben at a music festival, funny, kind, but not her usual type. They exchanged numbers, and he asked her out. Her initial reaction? Maybe, not sure his boyfriend material. Sophie brought up the date in a group chat with her two closest girlfriends. One of them rolled her eyes and said, "Ooh, I know guys like that. He seems too soft." The other chimed in, "I don't get the appeal. He's not hot." Sophie didn't text Ben back. Weeks later, she ran into him at a friend's birthday. This time, he was surrounded by people, confident, funny, making everyone laugh. Another girl in the group whispered, "God, Ben's kind of sexy when he talks like that." Something clicked. Her perception shifted, not because Ben had changed, but because his social value had been reframed by others. The next day, Sophie messaged him. Reflection, Sophie's desire hadn't disappeared after the first interaction, it had simply been paused by peer influence. Once the social green light appeared, the gate opened. Cultural narratives and sexual identity. In more conservative environments, women are often taught to suppress desire or view it as shameful. In liberal cultures, the pressure may go the other way, to be sexually expressive, adventurous, or sex-positive. Both forms of influence shape behavior, not always by choice, but by adaptation to the dominant script. This is why identical women, same temperament, same biology, may make wildly different sexual choices in New York versus Tehran. Modern amplifiers, social media and online validation. Today, social influence doesn't stop at the friend group. Likes, comments, DMs, and public perception have turned sexual behavior into performative identity. A woman may feel pressure to avoid seeming too eager or easy, be seen with men who improve her own social image, maintain a curated, desirable version of herself online. The fear of screenshots, gossip, or cancellation can radically alter how openly women express desire, even in private. Implications for relationships and attraction. If you're a man seeking connection, this law is crucial. You're not being evaluated in isolation. Women are constantly balancing personal desire with external perception. This doesn't mean you need to manipulate your image. It means understanding that your value in her eyes may increase or decrease based on how you're perceived by her circle or social environment. Likewise, for women, recognizing this influence can be empowering. It allows you to question, is this what I want, or what I think I should want? Breaking free from unconscious conformity begins with awareness. Summary: the law of social influence. Definition: a woman's sexual behavior is significantly shaped by social context, peer input, and cultural narratives. Mechanism: emotional attunement, reputation management, and social proof. Key trigger: social validation or judgment. Risk: suppressed desire, regret, conformity over authenticity. Opportunity: greater self-awareness, resilience to peer pressure, intentional choice-making. Chapter 7: Law of Peak Fertility Risk-Taking. When biology whispers, behavior listens. Overview of the law. The law of peak fertility risk-taking states that women are more likely to engage in riskier sexual behavior, flirtation, or exploration during their most fertile phase, typically around ovulation, due to evolutionary and hormonal factors. This shift is often subconscious, yet measurable across multiple domains: dress, behavior, desire, and even partner preference. Though modern society allows for sexual freedom across the entire cycle, biology still has its say, particularly during ovulation, when estrogen peaks and the body is optimally primed for conception. During this window, many women experience a spike in libido, a decreased sensitivity to social judgment, and a stronger pull toward high-genetic quality mates, those who display confidence, dominance, and physical markers of testosterone. Let's explore what's happening beneath the surface, and how it plays out in real life. The science behind the shift. Research in evolutionary psychology and hormonal biology has demonstrated that women undergo subtle but powerful changes during ovulation. Some key findings. Increased sexual desire: women report higher arousal and more sexual fantasies during ovulation. Shift in mate preferences: women tend to favor more masculine, symmetrical, and dominant men during peak fertility. Changes in appearance and behavior: studies show women are more likely to wear revealing or form-fitting clothing, apply makeup, and go out socially when ovulating. Lowered risk perception: there is a small but statistically significant increase in risky sexual decision-making. These behavioral cues likely evolved to maximize reproductive opportunity during the narrow fertility window, which lasts only 12 to 24 hours each cycle. While this is no longer about reproduction for many women today, the underlying instincts remain. Case study: the vacation fling. Subject: Nina, 31, corporate lawyer, single. Location: Barcelona, Spain. Context: a spontaneous romantic encounter on a solo vacation. Nina is a successful, analytical woman, measured, controlled, and not prone to impulsivity. In her own words, she doesn't do casual. But during a 10-day trip to Barcelona, something shifted. On her third night, she met a local bartender named Marcos, tattooed, assertive, magnetic. Their conversation was electric. By the next evening, they were back at his apartment. What surprised Nina most wasn't the sex, it was how unlike herself she felt. "It was like I stopped evaluating," she later said. "I didn't overthink. I just let it happen." When she returned home, she felt confused, not ashamed, but reflective. Why had she, someone so selective and cautious, suddenly broken her own rules? A week later, her period arrived, and something clicked. Nina had been ovulating during the fling. In hindsight, she recalled feeling unusually bold, sensual, even competitive in the days leading up to it. Her encounter with Marcos wasn't a moral failure. It was, in many ways, a biological response, a temporary lowering of inhibition driven by peak fertility. The psychological layer. Biology lays the groundwork, but psychology shapes the experience. Ovulation often comes with elevated mood and energy, increased confidence, greater attunement to male attention, mild disinhibition, especially in low-consequence contexts, e.g., travel, anonymity. That doesn't mean women are not themselves during ovulation, it means they're temporarily more open to opportunities that might otherwise be filtered out by caution, routine, or social pressure. Importantly, not all women act on this shift. Many don't. But even among those who don't engage in sexual behavior, fantasy, flirtation, and preference still shift, whether they acknowledge it or not. The social and cultural filters. In modern environments, where contraception is available and pregnancy is not the immediate concern, ovulation no longer dictates action. But it still affects attention and attraction. Social constraints, values, religion, and personal experiences filter how biological impulses are interpreted. One woman might indulge them. Another might observe them with curiosity and redirect the energy. Still, the internal signal is there. Social media now gives women platforms to express this shift through subtle cues, more selfies, flirtier captions, or bolder fashion choices. The expression of ovulatory shifts has gone digital, but the instinct is analog and ancient. What this means for men and partners. For partners, understanding this law is not about control or suspicion, it's about attunement. Many women aren't even consciously aware of the cyclical changes they undergo, so communication and self-awareness are key. Rather than reacting with jealousy or insecurity, male partners, or same-sex partners, can learn to anticipate shifts in desire and mood. Reignite chemistry during peak fertility periods by aligning with the partner's heightened energy. Support exploration in ways that strengthen the relationship, not threaten it. Awareness replaces confusion. And confusion is often the root of conflict. Summary: Law of peak fertility risk-taking. Core principle: women are biologically more open to sexual risk-taking during ovulation due to hormonal and evolutionary triggers. Behavioral signs: increased arousal, bolder social behavior, preference for dominantly masculine traits, adventurousness. Not deterministic, the instinct may be present, but culture, context, and individual psychology moderate the outcome. Key insight: temporary risk-taking behavior is not necessarily inconsistent, it's often cyclical, not random. In the next chapter, we'll explore how this periodic boldness is part of a larger mating pattern known as dual mating strategy, where women balance long-term security with short-term attraction, often without full conscious awareness. Ready to decode that next layer? Let's go. Chapter 8: The Law of Dual Mating Strategy. The man she loves may not always be the man she desires. One of the most compelling, controversial, and well-researched aspects of female sexual nature is the idea that women have evolved to pursue dual mating strategies, one for genetic fitness, the other for long-term stability. This law suggests that under certain conditions, especially around peak fertility, women may be sexually drawn to one type of man while emotionally or relationally committed to another. This is not a sign of moral failure or dysfunction, it is a deep-rooted adaptive behavior shaped by evolution. Let's unpack this. Understanding the dual mating hypothesis. From an evolutionary standpoint, women have faced a complex reproductive challenge: how to ensure strong genetic offspring while also securing long-term protection, resources, and support. These two needs are not always fulfilled by the same partner. Genetic benefits are associated with traits such as physical strength, symmetry, confidence, social dominance, and testosterone-linked features, what evolutionary psychologists often refer to as good genes indicators. Parental investment benefits are tied to traits like kindness, loyalty, stability, financial security, and emotional availability. In simplified terms, the alpha offers sexual allure, excitement, and dominant traits, good genes. The beta offers emotional safety, provisioning, and parental investment, good dad. While the labels are crude, the underlying psychology is supported by a wide body of cross-cultural research. Biological timing: when the strategy shifts. Several studies have shown that during the most fertile window of the menstrual cycle, women's preferences subtly, but measurably, shift. Increased attraction to more masculine faces, deeper voices, and dominant behavior. Greater openness to short-term, emotionally detached sexual encounters. Higher likelihood of fantasizing about men other than their partner, especially if their current partner lacks certain dominant traits. Yet, during non-fertile phases, women tend to favor men who are more nurturing, emotionally responsive, and committed. This shift is not conscious. It's biochemical. and it's a strategy developed across millennia of human survival, ensuring the offspring of such unions had both strong genes and dependable care. Modern manifestations of the law. In contemporary society, this dynamic often plays out in subtle emotional and behavioral patterns. A woman may love her partner deeply but feel inexplicably drawn to a coworker who exudes confidence and physical presence. She may fantasize about someone else during intimacy with her partner but never act on it. She may choose to marry that safe guy but carry emotional residue from the passionate, chaotic affair she had years earlier. Case study: the safe bet versus the dangerous flame. Subject: Jenna, 34, marketing director, married, mother of 2. Background: Jenna married Thomas, her college sweetheart. He's emotionally available, financially secure, and completely devoted to their family. She describes him as the best man I've ever known. Yet for the past year, Jenna has been distracted by fantasies of someone from her past, Marcus, a musician she dated briefly in her mid-20s. He was unreliable, emotionally volatile, but intensely attractive. Problem: the fantasies began to intensify after Jenna started working out and syncing with a new cycle tracking app. She noticed that every month, around ovulation, she became far more irritable with Thomas, less interested in sex with him, and more fixated on Marcus, who she hadn't seen in years. Insight: Jenna isn't ungrateful or disloyal. She's experiencing a resurgence of her dual mating impulses. Around ovulation, her body remembers the kind of man who ignited her instinctive, primal desire. Outside that window, her logical and emotional attachment to Thomas remained stable and loving. Resolution: after therapy and education, Jenna became more conscious of these cycles and shared them, carefully and respectfully, with her husband. Together, they introduced novelty and playfulness into their intimacy, and Jenna began using her heightened fertile energy to reignite desire within her marriage, rather than project it outward. Knowledge became power. Common misconceptions. Myth: women want bad boys. Truth: women may be attracted to dominant traits, especially during fertile phases, but they want to attach to men who show loyalty, investment, and long-term viability. Myth: if she's fantasizing about someone else, she doesn't love you. Truth: female fantasy often exists in parallel to real emotional attachment. The two are not mutually exclusive. Myth: women are wired to cheat. Truth: women are wired to optimize reproductive outcomes. This doesn't mean they're programmed to cheat, only that they may have dual preferences based on biological context. Implications for relationships. Understanding the law of dual mating strategy allows couples to remove shame from passing desires or fantasies. Communicate openly about sexual needs and cycles. Introduce novelty and polarity into long-term relationships to satisfy both emotional and primal desires. Partners who understand this law can make space for honesty without fear, and harness these biological truths to create more passion and intimacy, rather than resentment and confusion. Key takeaways. Women evolved with the capacity to desire one partner for genetic quality and another for stability. Fertile phases tend to intensify attraction to dominant, masculine traits. These instincts don't dictate behavior, but ignoring them often leads to suppressed frustration. Awareness can lead to better communication, renewed intimacy, and emotional intelligence in relationships. Chapter 9: Law of Sexual Fluidity. The principle. Women's sexual orientation and desires are more fluid and responsive to social, emotional, and situational factors than men's. Unlike the traditionally rigid model of sexuality, heterosexual or homosexual, static across time, research has shown that women's sexual orientation and behavior are often far more flexible. This doesn't mean arbitrary or random, it means adaptive. Female sexual fluidity allows for shifts in attraction that are influenced by emotional bonds, trust, novelty, hormonal states, and social environment. This phenomenon doesn't invalidate lesbian or heterosexual identities. Rather, it highlights that women are more likely than men to experience sexual desire based on person-specific emotional contexts, rather than fixed gender categories alone. Scientific foundation. Psychologist Dr. Lisa Diamond's landmark studies at the University of Utah found that a significant number of women who identified as lesbian or bisexual later reported falling in love with men, and vice versa, not because their identities changed, but because their desires adapted to their emotional experiences. Sexual orientation in women may be less about the gender of the object, and more about the intensity of the bond. Dr. Lisa Diamond. Research also indicates that oxytocin, the bonding hormone released during closeness, touch, and intimacy, may play a larger role in female desire than in male arousal. This neurochemical reinforcement means that emotional connection can literally shape sexual attraction over time. In contrast, male sexual orientation tends to be more category-specific and visually cued. For many women, arousal can be triggered by context, emotion, narrative, and trust, regardless of the gender of the person involved. What fluidity is, and isn't. It is a woman falling for a female friend after months of emotional closeness. It is a heterosexual woman feeling aroused by an unexpected dream or fantasy. It is an attraction that defies a person's conscious label or social identity. It is not indecision, promiscuity, or confusion. It is not the same as being bisexual, though fluid people may be. It is not a phase for everyone. Some women remain fluid across their entire lifespan. Social and cultural influence. Women are more likely to explore and express sexual fluidity in environments where such exploration is accepted or normalized, for example, liberal urban settings, college campuses, or artistic communities. Cultural narratives around female same-sex attraction, often fetishized or romanticized in media, have also made it more socially permissible for women to explore fluid identities than men. In contrast, male-male exploration often carries higher social stigma, further reinforcing rigidity in male orientation and behavior. Case study: the connection beyond gender. Subject: Samantha, 31. Background: a marketing manager in a major city, Samantha had always dated men and identified as straight. She had long-term relationships with 2 boyfriends over her 20s, and while both were emotionally stable, she often felt a lack of depth or soul-level connection. The shift: while working on a campaign with a creative team, she grew close to Rachel, a graphic designer. Their connection was instant, intellectual, emotional, and filled with shared passions. Over time, their conversations deepened. They began texting constantly, confiding secrets, and spending time together outside work. One night after drinks, they kissed. Samantha was stunned, not by the kiss, but by how natural and familiar it felt. She didn't feel gay. She didn't feel confused. She felt clarity. She didn't suddenly desire all women, but she did deeply desire Rachel. Reflection: I never thought I'd be with a woman. I wasn't suppressing anything. I just never felt this kind of connection before. I don't feel like my whole identity changed, I just fell for someone who happens to be female. Outcome: they dated for 18 months. When the relationship ended, Samantha didn't label herself as bisexual or lesbian, just open. Her story reflects what many fluid women report: attraction shaped by personhood, not gender. Implications. Understanding the law of sexual fluidity has major implications. For women, it normalizes non-linear sexual journeys and reduces the shame around identity shifts. For men, it dispels the myth that a woman who's fluid is automatically lost to them or confused. For society, it invites a more nuanced conversation about sexual identity that isn't bound to binary models. Key takeaways. Women's sexual desire is more fluid and emotionally responsive than men's, particularly over time. Emotional closeness can trigger unexpected shifts in desire. Sexual identity is not always a fixed trait, it can evolve. Fluidity is not confusion, it is adaptability rooted in emotion and connection. Chapter 10: The Law of Long-Term Hypergamy. She doesn't just want a man, she wants the best man she can get over time. What is long-term hypergamy? At the heart of long-term female mate selection lies a principle that has shaped human mating strategies for millennia: hypergamy, the preference to mate up in terms of social status, resources, intelligence, strength, or general mate value. In the short term, hypergamy can look like dating someone attractive or charismatic. In the long term, however, hypergamy reveals itself as a dynamic strategy. Women may seek to upgrade partners over time if a more desirable mate becomes available, especially if current needs, emotional, financial, or sexual, aren't being met. This isn't about greed or disloyalty, it's adaptive. From an evolutionary perspective, a woman's reproductive success historically depended on securing the best possible support and protection for herself and her offspring. As a result, women developed a finely tuned sensitivity to male traits like ambition, dominance, social proof, and resource potential. But the catch? What's high value can change. And so can attraction. Hypergamy isn't gold digging, it's strategy. Let's clear the confusion early. Hypergamy is often misunderstood or twisted into misogynistic talking points. It doesn't mean every woman is chasing billionaires or abandoning partners at the first sign of struggle. Rather, hypergamy is about optimization. Just as men are wired to seek youth and fertility signals, symmetry, waist-to-hip ratio, smooth skin, women are wired to seek signs of capability, stability, and strength, attributes that increase a mate's long-term value. Hypergamy operates subconsciously, triggered by both biological cues and cultural feedback loops. A woman may begin to feel restless or emotionally disconnected from a stable partner not because she's unfaithful, but because she's unconsciously reassessing his value in light of new social data. Hypergamy over time, a moving target. Women assess not just where a man is, but where he's going. Is he progressing or stagnating? Is he respected by other men? Is he emotionally reliable? Has he grown over the years, or has he plateaued? These questions influence whether attraction deepens or dissolves over time. This is where long-term hypergamy differs from short-term attraction. In the early stages, charm, chemistry, and confidence might suffice. But as time passes, the trajectory of a man matters more than the snapshot. Case study: Julia and the corporate climb. Background: Julia, 32, was in a 5-year relationship with her college sweetheart, Ryan. He was kind, funny, and emotionally supportive. He worked in a mid-level tech role and had no major ambitions beyond job security and weekend hobbies. Julia, meanwhile, had climbed the ranks at a marketing firm. She was earning double Ryan's salary, attending industry conferences, and networking with executives. Over time, she began to feel a strange disconnect, not just sexually, but emotionally. When she met Leo, an older, driven entrepreneur, at a leadership workshop, the difference was stark. Leo exuded competence, vision, and decisiveness. The contrast made Julia realize something difficult: she no longer admired Ryan. She tried to talk to him about growth, future planning, even couples coaching, but he dismissed it, saying, "I'm happy with what we have." Eventually, Julia ended the relationship, not in anger, but in quiet resignation. She didn't trade up immediately, but she knew she'd outgrown her current partner. Analysis: Julia's experience is a textbook case of long-term hypergamy in action. As her personal value increased, socially, professionally, her psychological need for a peer or superior in those areas increased too. Ryan's emotional value was not enough to sustain attraction when growth and status misalignment emerged. Triggers for long-term hypergamy: exposure to higher status males, workplace, social circles, or media influence can create unconscious comparisons. Misalignment of ambition or growth, when one partner evolves and the other remains static. Diminished admiration, loss of respect kills attraction over time. Financial imbalance, not inherently problematic, but can fuel tension if tied to effort or perceived passivity. Social signaling, female friends' opinions, family pressure, and cultural expectations can accelerate discontent. Does hypergamy make long-term commitment impossible? Not at all. But it demands intentionality. Men who want to maintain long-term attraction must grow consistently, even modestly. Stay emotionally and mentally engaged. Maintain or build perceived competence and confidence. Avoid passive stagnation or complacency. Women, on the other hand, can benefit by understanding their own triggers. A momentary drop in admiration doesn't mean your partner is wrong for you. Sometimes it's projection, burnout, or unrealistic expectation. The key is conscious reflection before action. Modern complications. In the age of Instagram, remote work, and constant digital comparison, long-term hypergamy is under pressure. Women are exposed to thousands of images of high-value men every week. The grass can seem greener, especially when relationships hit a plateau. Simultaneously, men face rising expectations, not just to provide materially, but to evolve emotionally, intellectually, and socially. This creates tension, but also opportunity. Conclusion: navigating long-term hypergamy. The law of long-term hypergamy is neither a threat nor a curse, it's a lens. Women want connection, yes. But they also want progress, in themselves and their partners. Understanding this law allows couples to grow together rather than apart. Hypergamy doesn't mean women leave when things get hard. It means they stay when they see you're still becoming. Chapter 11: The Law of Emotional Memory. A woman may forget what you said, but she will never forget how you made her feel. The law defined. Women do not just remember sexual experiences in terms of physical sensation, they encode them emotionally. Female sexual memory is rarely compartmentalized from the emotional context surrounding it. The details of how a woman felt during an encounter, desired, safe, excited, ashamed, loved, or abandoned, often leave a deeper imprint than the physical act itself. This is the law of emotional memory. In women, emotional intensity during sexual or romantic experiences creates long-lasting imprints that influence future attraction, attachment, and sexual decision-making. These emotional imprints are not just memories, they become filters through which new partners are judged, fantasies are formed, and decisions are made. The neuroscience behind emotional imprinting. When emotional and sexual arousal occur, they activate powerful brain circuits involving the amygdala, emotional memory, hippocampus, contextual memory, and limbic system, reward and attachment. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone, floods the system during physical intimacy, especially for women, who tend to release more of it during orgasm and emotional closeness. This creates a biochemical snapshot of the experience, one that can resurface months or even years later. This is why women may remain emotionally tethered to certain past lovers, even when the relationships were unhealthy. It's not nostalgia, it's neurologically anchored emotion. Cultural reflection: why women rarely hit it and quit it. Though this is changing in some circles, research consistently shows that women are less likely than men to pursue purely casual, emotionless sexual encounters. It's not because women lack libido, it's because emotional memory weighs more heavily on future feelings and decisions. Even when a woman tries to detach emotionally from a partner, the residual impact of how she felt during sex can persist. These emotional traces can create longing, regret, resentment, or profound loyalty. They can reawaken through a familiar scent, a song, a text message, or even a dream. Use case study: Jessica's echo. Profile: Jessica, 32, marketing director, divorced. Case summary: after ending a toxic relationship with Daniel, a charismatic but emotionally unavailable man, Jessica spent 2 years dating other men, some stable, kind, even physically attractive. But none of them felt right. They were great on paper, but I just didn't feel the pull, Jessica said. Even when I met someone kind and sexy, it was like something was missing. I kept comparing them to Daniel, even though I knew he was wrong for me. Despite therapy and self-reflection, Jessica found herself reminiscing about intense moments with Daniel, a rainy night in his car, a song they once danced to, a heated argument that turned into passionate sex. These memories were etched not in logic but in the body and the heart. They carried emotional intensity that no newer, safer experience seemed to match. Jessica wasn't chasing Daniel the man, she was chasing the emotional high encoded during their relationship. Her body remembered what her mind tried to forget. Patterns of the law in action. Here are recurring ways the law of emotional memory expresses itself in women's sexual behavior. The inexplicable rebound, returning to an ex who was bad for her, because the emotional charge still lingers. The first love effect, a deep bond formed during early sexual experiences, can unconsciously set the bar for emotional expectations in future relationships. Sexual flashbacks, emotional context can trigger arousal or revulsion based on past encounters, even if the current situation is objectively different. Unconscious comparison, a woman may compare a current partner's emotional presence to a previous partner's intensity without realizing it. Male implications, why consistency matters. For male readers, what this law means is simple but crucial: how you make her feel during intimacy matters more than what you do. The intensity and sincerity of presence, emotional connection, and nonverbal communication often leave the most lasting impression. Even physical touch, when layered with emotional safety or danger, gets coded differently. The same act of kissing can feel either invasive or magnetic, depending on emotional resonance. When the past haunts the present. Sometimes emotional memory can work against women. It can prevent them from forming new attachments because they're subconsciously holding onto past emotional highs or wounds. In therapy, this is often addressed as emotional ghosts, past feelings lingering in present decision-making. Breaking these patterns isn't about forgetting the past, it's about reintegrating emotional memory with conscious awareness and healthy present-day experiences. Closing thoughts. The law of emotional memory teaches us a powerful truth: for many women, sexuality is inseparable from emotion. The emotional context of an experience becomes part of the sexual content. Women don't just remember sex, they remember how it felt to be seen, heard, valued, or used in those moments. This law also explains why women are often selective, cautious, or conflicted about sex. It's not fear of judgment or inhibition, it's the subconscious understanding that what happens sexually doesn't just stay in the moment, it stays in the soul. Chapter 12, The Law of Social Signaling. Sexual Behavior as Communication. Human beings are social creatures, and women, due to both evolutionary wiring and cultural conditioning, often engage in sexual behavior not solely for physical pleasure or reproduction, but as a means of signaling something: status, independence, desirability, rebellion, emotional shifts, or even social alignment. This law states: women's sexual behavior is frequently used, consciously or unconsciously, as a form of social communication, signaling status, identity, emotional state, or transformation. While this may seem manipulative at first glance, it's actually a natural expression of how humans use behavior to communicate deeper truths. Just as fashion, language, and social media posts convey identity and belonging, so too does sexual expression. Why social signaling matters in female sexual behavior. Women evolved in social environments where reputation and social alignment often meant survival for themselves and their offspring. Unlike men, who could gain social value through displays of dominance or physical risk, women often had to navigate more complex social hierarchies based on relationships, alliances, and perception. Sexual expression, then, becomes a language. Desire as empowerment: I choose. Risk-taking as rebellion: I won't be controlled. Abstinence as self-respect: I know my worth. Provocation as attention: I still matter. Conquest as proof: I can get him. Importantly, these signals are not always conscious or calculated. Many women don't realize they're signaling anything at all. But to outside observers, especially to partners, friends, or competitors, the message is often loud and clear. 2. Social and cultural influences. Sexual signaling doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's deeply influenced by cultural norms, peer dynamics, and digital feedback loops. In some social groups, sexual liberation is a badge of empowerment. In others, modesty is the signal of virtue or higher value. On social media, women may curate an image that's simultaneously sensual and unattainable, not always for men, but for validation from peers or to signal self-worth. The pressure to perform sexuality in a certain way can influence behavior even when it contradicts true internal desire. That contradiction is often where emotional dissonance or regret stems from. 3. Use case study: post-breakup rebellion. Background. Alicia, 28, had been in a long-term relationship for 5 years. She was faithful, emotionally invested, and deeply aligned with her partner's conservative values. When the relationship ended due to infidelity on his part, Alicia went through what she described as a sexual reawakening. Within a month, she had posted a series of sultry photos on Instagram, started attending parties she previously avoided, and began casually dating multiple men, something completely out of character for her. Analysis? On the surface, Alicia's behavior might be interpreted as her simply enjoying her freedom. But when we examine it through the lens of social signaling, her actions served multiple purposes. To herself, I'm not broken. I'm still attractive. I'm in control. To her ex, you lost something valuable. To her peers, I'm not ashamed. I'm thriving. To society, I'm reclaiming my narrative. In interviews, Alicia admitted that some of her sexual encounters felt empty, but she was grateful for them because they helped her say something she didn't yet know how to verbalize. This is the law of social signaling in action, sexual behavior as a communication tool during a personal and emotional shift. 4. Male versus female sexual signaling. While both sexes use sexuality to signal, women tend to be more contextually strategic, using sex to communicate internal states rather than just external power. Men may signal conquest. Women often signal change, emotion, or identity. This isn't always about getting something from others. It can be deeply internal. A woman may initiate a sexual relationship not because she wants the partner, but because she wants to feel something: validation, power, revenge, healing, or transformation. Vide implications for relationships and society. Understanding this law can be powerful for both men and women. For women, becoming aware of when your sexual behavior is a form of messaging allows for more conscious decision-making and emotional clarity. Ask, am I doing this for me, or to say something to someone else? For men, don't assume all sexual interest is direct attraction. Sometimes, you're the canvas, not the message. A woman may be signaling independence, anger, or self-repair, and you're simply in the right place at the right time. For society, recognizing that sexuality is not always about lust helps reduce slut-shaming, moral panic, or the assumption that all female desire is either irrational or manipulative. 6. Exceptions and nuance. It's important to acknowledge. Not every sexual act is symbolic. Sometimes it is simply about pleasure, intimacy, or chemistry. Not all women express or use social signaling the same way. Culture, personality, religion, and attachment style all play roles. Social signaling doesn't make the act disingenuous, it adds a layer, not a lie. 7. Key takeaways. Women's sexual behavior often carries symbolic meaning beyond the act itself. Sexual decisions may reflect shifts in identity, emotional state, or self-perception. Recognizing the social signaling aspect of sexuality adds depth to our understanding of relationships, attraction, and personal transformation. Chapter 13, The Law of Safety and Security. Without safety, desire rarely takes root. When people think of sexual arousal, especially from a male perspective, they often associate it with spontaneity, visual stimulation, and novelty. But for many women, the gateway to desire is not visual or physical, it's psychological. And one of the most critical components of that psychological state is safety. The law of safety and security states that a woman's sexual expression is strongly influenced by her sense of emotional and physical safety. Without these, arousal may not initiate, or, worse, may trigger avoidance, anxiety, or dissociation. This law is not just about the absence of danger. It's about the presence of trust, consistency, and emotional grounding. A woman must feel safe not just from harm, but from judgment, shame, rejection, or emotional instability. The more secure she feels, the more freely her sexual energy flows. Biological and evolutionary foundations. From an evolutionary standpoint, this makes perfect sense. Women have far more at stake biologically in reproduction. Pregnancy, childbirth, and child-rearing are costly processes, physically, emotionally, and temporally. As such, the female brain evolved to prioritize careful selection and to associate arousal with safety cues. If an environment or partner signals unpredictability or threat, a woman's nervous system often shuts down arousal as a protective measure. The amygdala, a part of the brain involved in fear and emotional regulation, plays a pivotal role here. Studies using brain imaging show that women's amygdala activity increases in threatening situations, reducing activity in the brain's sexual arousal centers. Simply put, the brain can't be in fear mode and pleasure mode at the same time. Modern interpretations of safety. In today's world, danger doesn't always look like physical harm. It can include emotional volatility, hot-cold behavior, unpredictability, judgmental attitudes toward her body, past, or preferences, social exposure, fear of being shamed or labeled, disrespect for boundaries, not listening, pushing too far, too fast, unstable environments, financial uncertainty, chaotic relationships. Women often describe getting out of their heads as a barrier to intimacy. This internal noise, worry, shame, performance anxiety, is often the result of feeling unsafe in some form. The secure frame, arousal's hidden catalyst. The most sexually expressive women in long-term relationships often report one key factor: the ability to fully trust their partner. They describe being able to let go, melt, or open up without fear of being judged, abandoned, or manipulated. Safety doesn't kill attraction, it enables deeper, lasting desire. A securely attached woman isn't uninterested in excitement. But she wants that excitement within a stable emotional container. The fantasy of chaos may thrill, but the foundation of security is what sustains. Use case study: Emma and the unstable charmer. Background: Emma, a 34-year-old attorney, had always been drawn to confident, adventurous men. After a string of casual flings in her 20s, she entered a whirlwind relationship with Alex, a charismatic, spontaneous entrepreneur who made her feel alive. The spark. At first, the chemistry was electric. They had intense sex, passionate fights, and wild weekends. She was deeply attracted to his unpredictability and boldness. It reminded her of the emotional highs she associated with real love. The breakdown. But over time, Emma began to feel uneasy. Alex was emotionally unavailable, disappearing for days, making dismissive jokes about her vulnerability, and showing no interest in her emotional needs. She began losing interest in sex, not because she no longer found him attractive, but because she couldn't relax around him. She found herself dreading intimacy. Her body became tense during physical contact. She avoided undressing in front of him. Eventually, she left, confused, blaming herself for not being passionate anymore. The shift? A year later, she began dating David, a thoughtful, emotionally consistent man who made her feel seen and respected. It wasn't fireworks at first. But as her sense of trust deepened, her sexual desire grew in ways she'd never experienced. Emma reported feeling safe enough to be wild, realizing that her deepest sexual self only emerged when she wasn't in survival mode. Implications of the law. For women, if your desire feels blocked, consider whether your environment or partner truly supports your safety. Healing may require boundaries, therapy, or simply learning to recognize unsafe patterns. For men, erotic connection is enhanced, not diminished, when you make her feel emotionally safe. That doesn't mean being boring, it means being consistent, respectful, and attuned. For relationships, sexual stagnation is often misdiagnosed as boredom or incompatibility. In many cases, it's a signal that one or both partners no longer feel secure. Key takeaways. Arousal and fear cannot coexist. Emotional and physical safety are prerequisites, not bonuses, for sustained sexual desire in women. Creating a secure environment enhances, not suppresses, sexual spontaneity and expression. If a woman's libido disappears, the issue may not be attraction, but trust and safety. Chapter 14: Law of Fantasy and Narrative. Desire needs a story to breathe. For many women, arousal begins in the mind, long before the body catches up. Unlike the more visually and physically driven patterns often associated with male sexuality, female sexual desire is frequently sparked by narrative, emotion, and psychological context. This isn't just poetic language, it's a demonstrable reality. Research in neuroscience and psychology shows that the female brain responds more intensely to imagined scenarios, stories of emotional intimacy, and rich narrative environments than it does to simple erotic stimuli. This is the law of fantasy and narrative. Women's sexual arousal is heavily influenced by internal stories, emotional plotlines, and imaginative stimulation, often more so than by direct physical or visual cues. Why stories matter in female desire. Storytelling plays a key role in human cognition. But for many women, the story isn't just entertainment, it's foreplay. Female desire is often embedded within a why and who, not just the what. The context of an encounter, the emotional dynamics, the stakes, the character development, and the build-up all contribute to the intensity of arousal. A candlelit dinner isn't erotic because of the food, it's the suggestion of what might follow. A forbidden flirtation becomes exciting not because of the physical proximity, but because of the narrative tension it evokes. Erotica and romance novels succeed not because of graphic detail alone, but because of the emotional texture and storyline. In studies measuring female arousal, women often show greater physiological response to suggestive scenarios, emotionally layered scenes, or even imagined conversations than to direct pornography, unless that pornography includes some narrative element. This is not a bug. It's a feature of how female sexual psychology evolved. Evolutionary roots. From an evolutionary standpoint, women faced higher costs in reproduction, pregnancy, childbirth, and child rearing. As a result, desire evolved to become strategically selective and deeply contextual. Women needed more information about a mate's reliability, emotional availability, and future intentions before engaging sexually. Narrative helped provide that context. Stories became a survival tool, a way to test-drive fantasies safely, gauge emotional outcomes, and indulge in hypothetical risk with no real-world cost. Even today, this is reflected in how women consume erotic content. While male-targeted porn is often visual and action-driven, female-targeted erotica is usually written, audio-based, or emotionally immersive, featuring slow-burn build-up, inner monologues, and emotionally rich characters. Psychological mechanics. What exactly makes narrative so potent in the female erotic imagination? Projection. Stories allow women to insert themselves into the fantasy and make it emotionally personal. Suspense and build-up, anticipation, not climax, is often the height of pleasure. Emotional depth. Characters with emotional nuance create more attachment and thus stronger arousal. Symbolism. Objects, places, or rituals in stories, like a first kiss or a hidden letter, can become sexual triggers through emotional association. The role of fantasy in relationships. Understanding this law isn't just for authors of erotic fiction, it's a powerful tool for partners who want to deepen intimacy. In relationships, emotional storytelling, role play, or fantasy sharing can rekindle arousal, especially when routine threatens excitement. Sharing fantasies in a non-judgmental setting opens new intimacy channels. Crafting scenes or playful narratives together creates anticipation and intrigue. Knowing that a woman's desire may not always be spontaneous, but instead needs emotional framing, can prevent misinterpretations of disinterest. Case study: the emotional affair that began with a story. Background: Julia, 35, was in a stable but emotionally dull marriage. No major problems, just routine. She met Daniel, a co-worker, during a collaborative project. What started as casual work conversations evolved into long email exchanges, full of shared jokes, late-night confessions, and eventually, deep emotional intimacy. Julia didn't cheat physically, not at first. But she became increasingly obsessed. Her arousal spiked not from physical proximity but from the ongoing story unfolding in her mind, the possibility, the danger, the unmet longing, the what-if. She admitted fantasizing about Daniel while being intimate with her husband, not because Daniel was more attractive, but because his presence was part of a richer, more emotionally charged narrative. Eventually, the relationship turned physical, but by then, the emotional affair had long eclipsed the physical one in intensity. Takeaway: Julia's experience wasn't about sex, it was about the story of sex. And that story, full of tension and emotional discovery, was the real source of her arousal. Modern implications. In an era of short attention spans, swipe-based dating, and fast consumption, the law of fantasy and narrative reminds us that depth still matters. Many women are less turned on by the image of a body than by the feeling of being seen, chosen, desired with intention. It also explains why erotic novels and fan fiction communities thrive. Women may fantasize more about scenarios than people. Role play and verbal seduction often work better than visual cues. Slow burn dynamics in fiction and real life create lasting desire. Key takeaways: narrative, emotional context, and fantasy are often the ignition switch for female desire. Arousal is not always direct, it's associative, imaginative, and story-driven. Partners who understand and engage with this layer of desire can deepen connection and sexual fulfillment. Chapter 15: Law of Hormonal Influence on Mate Preference. How biology temporarily rewrites attraction. Human attraction often feels like a mystery, an intuitive pull toward one person and not another, sometimes even when logic protests. But what if part of this magnetic force isn't just about personality or compatibility, but a temporary biological script running silently beneath our awareness? This chapter explores how a woman's hormonal fluctuations, especially during the menstrual cycle, can shift her mate preferences, subtly influencing who she finds attractive, when, and why. This phenomenon is encapsulated in the law of hormonal influence on mate preference, which states: attraction in women is not fixed, it fluctuates predictably with hormonal changes, particularly around ovulation, temporarily biasing preference toward more genetically fit, dominant, or masculine traits. The science: what hormones are doing behind the scenes. Women's bodies are cyclical. Each menstrual cycle, roughly 28 days long, features dramatic hormonal shifts, rises and falls in estrogen, progesterone, luteinizing hormone, LH, and testosterone, which have measurable effects on mood, energy, and sexual desire. Around ovulation, day 12 to 16. Estrogen peaks, increasing sexual desire. Testosterone, though in small amounts, also rises, boosting libido. Women are more likely to be drawn to O. Symmetrical faces. O. Deep voices. O. Assertive, confident behavior. O. Physically dominant or alpha characteristics. This is their rise to be an evolutionary adaptation. During the fertile window, preferences shift toward genetic fitness, traits associated with good genes, strong immunity, and reproductive advantage. During luteal phase, after ovulation, progesterone increases. Estrogen and testosterone drop. Desire for stability, warmth, and emotional security increases. Preference shifts toward nurturing, long-term partner traits. Research highlights: a 2007 study by Penton-Voke and Perrett found that women rated more masculine faces as attractive only during high fertility phases. Ganges, Tad and Thornhill, 1998, discovered that women were more likely to fantasize about or flirt with alpha males while ovulating, even if in a committed relationship. Hormonal contraceptives, which flatten the natural cycle, can suppress or alter these shifts in preference entirely, an important and under-discussed implication. Use case study: the ovulation paradox. Subject: Maya, 28, marketing professional, in a 3-year relationship. Context: Maya is in a stable, loving relationship with Josh, a kind, emotionally supportive partner who shares her long-term goals. Situation: around mid-cycle, she begins experiencing a strong attraction to a colleague, Liam, who is rugged, assertive, and flirts casually with her at the office. It wasn't logical, Maya says. Josh is everything I want long-term, but something about Liam during that week made my heart race, even though I'd never go there. Later, after her period starts, the attraction to Liam fades back into the background. She feels closer and more emotionally engaged with Josh again. This isn't infidelity, it's biology temporarily steering perception. Maya didn't act on her attraction, but her experience highlights how even stable women in secure relationships can be influenced by hormonal undercurrents without necessarily understanding why. Why this matters. Understanding the law of hormonal influence does not mean dismissing women's choices as just hormonal. Instead, it adds nuance. For women, becoming aware of cyclical patterns can help in making more informed relationship decisions and in extending compassion to oneself when desire seems to shift. For men, recognizing that attraction is partly influenced by biology can reduce insecurity during moments when a partner seems more emotionally distant or less sexually responsive. For relationships, timing matters. Understanding when connection and intimacy feel strongest, and why, can improve communication and build resilience. Implications in modern contexts. Contraception's role. Women on hormonal birth control tend to prefer less masculine traits and show less cyclical variation in attraction. This raises important questions about partner choice while medicated versus unmedicated. Dating timing. Some researchers suggest that early dating interactions occurring during ovulation might feel more intense, affecting initial impressions of chemistry. Marital shifts post-pill. Some anecdotal reports and early studies indicate women who meet their partners while on birth control sometimes experience a shift in attraction after going off it, due to restored hormonal cycling. Conclusion: the wisdom in awareness. Attraction isn't always a fixed compass, it can be a moving tide, influenced by deep biological rhythms. The law of hormonal influence on mate preference teaches us that even when everything seems aligned, the body may still whisper preferences that don't fit neatly into long-term logic. Instead of resisting or pathologizing this truth, we can learn from it. Recognize the patterns. Track them. Discuss them. When women understand the hormonal rhythm shaping their sexual and emotional experiences, they gain the power to move from being reactive to being reflective, choosing with awareness, not confusion. Chapter 16: What this means for men and relationships. The laws you've explored so far uncover a deeper reality. Female sexual nature is not random, nor is it purely emotional or hormonal. It is patterned, dynamic, and deeply influenced by context. For men, this knowledge can either be a source of confusion and frustration, or a framework for empathy, strength, and connection. This chapter is written especially for men, partners, husbands, lovers, and observers who seek to better understand the women in their lives and build stronger, more satisfying relationships. 1. Stop expecting static desire. One of the most common frustrations men express is the inconsistency in a woman's sexual desire. One week she's passionately engaged, another, she's withdrawn or indifferent. Understanding. This isn't about losing interest, it's often a result of hormonal shifts, emotional security, or psychological environment. A woman's libido is more responsive than spontaneous, and it's closely tied to factors like stress, relational harmony, and cycle timing. Takeaway. Don't expect desire to be linear. Cultivate emotional intimacy, reduce stressors, and be aware of her cycle, not to manipulate, but to cooperate with her biology. 2. Emotional safety is sexual fuel. Many men focus on performance, physique, or status when trying to reignite passion. But for most women, emotional safety is the precondition for sexual freedom. If she doesn't feel safe, emotionally, mentally, physically, her arousal system rarely activates fully. Case example. Michael, a 38-year-old married man, was confused by his wife's decreasing interest in sex. Through open communication, he learned she felt emotionally invisible, rarely affirmed, listened to, or validated. Once he shifted his focus from bedroom techniques to daily connection and appreciation, their intimacy rebounded. Takeaway. Emotional investment isn't optional, it's foundational. Want a more sexually open partner? Create a more emotionally safe space. 3. Know the dual mating strategy. One of the more uncomfortable realities for men is the concept of dual mating strategy, the idea that women are often attracted to one type of man for short-term excitement, e.g., dominance, physicality, edge, and another for long-term security, e.g., dependability, nurturing, status. Sometimes, one man embodies both. Often, he doesn't. Implication. This doesn't mean all women are unfaithful or calculating. It means that attraction is multidimensional, and long-term partners should not assume that familiarity alone keeps desire alive. Takeaway. If you're in a long-term relationship, invest in maintaining polarity. Don't become so safe and routine that the spark disappears. Emotional connection and sexual tension must coexist. 4. Social signals matter, whether you like it or not. Women are often influenced by how others perceive their partner. This includes his confidence, how he carries himself in public, and how others, especially women, respond to him. This is a remnant of evolutionary hypergamy, seeking the most desirable mate by social proof. Don't fake it. Build it. Invest in your own self-respect, status, and purpose, not to impress women, but because it genuinely shifts how you show up, and that shift is often more attractive than any single trait. 5. Don't moralize her nature, work with it. Many men fall into the trap of either idealizing women or resenting them for being too emotional, too picky, or too complicated. Both approaches fail because they are rooted in moral judgment, not understanding. New perspective. Female sexual nature is adaptive. It's responsive. It has evolved for survival, not simplicity. Your role isn't to fix or change her, it's to understand and partner with her evolving needs. 6. Communication is not a weakness, it's a strategic tool. Many men were taught that talking about feelings is weak. But emotional intelligence is not softness, it's sophistication. Understanding her needs and expressing your own builds trust, which deepens intimacy. Use questions like, what makes you feel most desired? Is there something I can do that helps you feel safer or more connected? When do you feel most feminine or sexy? Take away. Real communication isn't about fixing her, it's about learning her. 7. Don't be a passenger, lead the dance. While many women want emotional safety, they also crave masculine leadership, not control, but decisiveness, presence, and groundedness. Polarity matters. A man who knows what he wants, leads with kindness, and holds space with strength, is often far more attractive than one who is always nice. Leadership tip. Take initiative in planning dates, expressing desires, and creating structure in the relationship. This builds the kind of sexual polarity that fuels attraction. Final thoughts. Understanding women's sexual nature isn't about seduction techniques or manipulation. It's about literacy, learning the language of female attraction, desire, and emotional rhythms. If you're willing to let go of your assumptions, drop the blame, and engage with curiosity, you will find that what once seemed complicated becomes predictable, even beautiful. Your role is not to chase her arousal, it's to create the environment where it naturally rises. Chapter 17, Female Empowerment Through Understanding. For generations, female sexuality has been shaped not by knowledge, but by shame, silence, and distortion. Cultural scripts have told women that desire must be hidden, that sexuality must be earned through love, or that assertiveness in the sexual realm is dangerous or inappropriate. These narratives, whether religious, familial, or media-driven, have suppressed women's ability to make clear, informed choices about their sexual selves. But knowledge changes that. Understanding the fundamental laws of women's sexual nature isn't just for observers or partners, it's a powerful tool for women themselves. It offers a mirror, not a mold. A means to see oneself clearly, not to conform to someone else's version of femininity. Reclaiming agency through insight. Many women move through their sexual lives responding to emotional impulses, societal expectations, or romantic narratives without ever asking, why do I feel this way? Why do I want this person now but not later? Why do I retreat after intimacy? Why am I drawn to someone who isn't good for me? These aren't questions of weakness or instability, they are questions of biology, evolution, and emotional wiring. Recognizing the patterns doesn't diminish free will, it amplifies it. When you understand what drives desire, attachment, arousal, and ambivalence, you can distinguish between authentic longing and inherited programming. Self-awareness is the foundation of empowerment. The end of sexual guilt. A woman who understands that her shifting libido is influenced by hormonal rhythms can stop pathologizing her body. A woman who understands hypergamy as a natural impulse, not a betrayal, can be honest about what she seeks in a partner. A woman who knows her fantasies are shaped by safety, story, and emotional tension can stop apologizing for them. Instead of guilt, she can embrace discernment. Instead of shame, she can cultivate integrity, not in the moralistic sense, but in the psychological one, the ability to act in alignment with one's full self. Use case study, Serena's story. Serena, 35, a successful tech executive, had always felt embarrassed by her disinterest in long-term sexual monogamy despite deeply loving her husband. She tried therapy, supplements, and mindfulness, but nothing fixed it. After learning about the law of dual mating strategy and the law of sexual fantasy and narrative, she realized her desire wasn't broken, it was misaligned with how she'd been told good wives behave. Rather than destroy her marriage, this insight led to honest conversations and a redefinition of intimacy with her partner. They didn't open the marriage, but they created room for emotional honesty and new sources of eroticism. Understanding herself gave her a freedom no label ever had. The power of naming patterns. When something has a name, it becomes visible. When it's visible, it becomes manageable. Each law in this book acts as a kind of emotional vocabulary. Women who can name their inner conflicts, e.g., the tension between stability and excitement, safety and mystery, emotional connection and physical desire, are far more capable of navigating them. It's not about becoming predictable. It's about becoming conscious. That consciousness is what lets a woman set sexual boundaries without guilt, explore fantasies without self-judgment, choose partners with clarity, leave situations that dishonor her instincts, stay in relationships that nurture growth, rejecting external scripts. There is no correct way to be sexual, only conscious ways. Society has long offered women two basic options, repression or performance. But real empowerment is neither withholding nor performing. It's about tuning into one's own signals and trusting them. The laws in this book are not instructions for how to behave. They are maps for how to navigate your inner world. Like any map, they don't determine where you go, but they help you get there with less confusion and more confidence. Integration over rebellion. Modern sexual liberation often encourages women to rebel against conservative norms by mimicking masculine behaviors or adopting hypersexual personas. But true liberation is not reactionary, it's integrated. It means women can hold desire and dignity in the same hand. Vulnerability and agency. Craving and boundaries. By understanding these laws, women don't have to rebel against the old system or blindly follow a new one, they can build their own. Final thoughts, a reclamation. When women understand the underlying forces shaping their sexual nature, they stop fearing their impulses and start claiming their complexity. This is not about biology as destiny, it's about biology as a dimension of identity, alongside personal history, emotion, culture, and choice. Empowered sexuality is not about always knowing what you want, it's about having the tools to find out and the strength to act on it. Chapter 18, The Future of Sexual Dynamics. Are the laws still valid in a changing world? Human sexuality has always been shaped by a combination of biology and environment. But today, the environment is changing faster than ever before. With the rise of birth control, online dating, shifting gender roles, and artificial intelligence, it's fair to ask, will the fundamental laws of women's sexual nature still hold in the future? To answer that, we must examine what's changing, what's not, and how our ancient instincts are adapting, or struggling to adapt, to modern conditions. 1. Technology and the sexual marketplace. Dating apps have dramatically transformed the way people meet and pair up. A woman today has access to more potential partners in a single evening of swiping than most of her ancestors encountered in a lifetime. Hypergamy amplified, with so many options visible at once, many women naturally gravitate toward the top-tier men, those with looks, status, or charisma. This reinforces the law of hypergamy, but with digital steroids. Winner takes most effect. A small percentage of men receive the majority of attention online, leaving many others out of the mating game entirely. This creates relationship polarization, with some women having access to elite partners while others become more cautious or avoidant due to disappointing options. Use case study. Jasmine, 29, is a marketing executive in a large city. On dating apps, she regularly receives messages from doctors, athletes, and high-earning entrepreneurs. However, most first dates fizzle, leaving her feeling emotionally disconnected. Despite high standards, she finds herself returning to a former college boyfriend with fewer credentials but deeper emotional chemistry. 2. Birth control and reproductive freedom. The invention of hormonal contraception gave women unprecedented control over reproduction and, indirectly, over sexual behavior. It decoupled sex from pregnancy, enabling more exploration without long-term biological consequences. However, studies show that hormonal birth control can subtly alter mate preference, often steering women toward less masculine, more nurturing partners, potentially conflicting with instinctual desires during high fertility periods. Freedom with side effects. While the law of emotional safety remains unchanged, birth control may dull hormonal peaks and valleys that once drove risk-taking and raw attraction. 3. Redefining gender roles and relationship models. As society increasingly embraces gender equality, the traditional dynamic of male provider, female nurturer is dissolving. Women now lead companies, out-earn male partners, and make independent life choices. Yet even in these liberated contexts, many women still experience attraction to competence, strength, and leadership traits in partners. The desire for protection, emotional safety, and stability doesn't vanish with financial independence, it simply evolves. Law of dual mating strategy endures. A woman may crave one type of partner emotionally and another sexually, regardless of her social standing. Use case study. Lena, 35, is a self-made tech founder. She dates a sensitive artist who aligns with her values but finds herself fantasizing about her assertive and dominant male competitor. She doesn't want to be rescued, but something primal in her reacts to decisiveness and authority. For artificial companionship and AI relationships. With AI-driven chatbots, virtual lovers, and hyperrealistic simulations, some predict a future where relationships with machines become normalized. Will this bypass emotional laws? Possibly. But it's likely that women, more than men, will seek emotional realism, nuance, and trust in these interactions, reflecting the law of emotional primacy and the law of safety. Emotional stimulation may be digitally mimicked, but it will still need to feel authentic to trigger genuine desire. 5. Global culture versus tribal instinct. While urban life pushes us toward casual, fast-paced connections, the deeper evolutionary blueprint still prefers bonding, safety, and tribe. The rise in loneliness, mental health challenges, and dating burnout suggests that modern culture is out of sync with primal needs. Even in polyamory or non-monogamy, emotional rules apply. Jealousy, bonding, preference, and memory all play roles. The laws don't break, they just show up in new ways. 6. Are the laws still valid? Yes, but we must distinguish between the surface behaviors that change with culture and the underlying drivers that remain consistent. Fundamental law future status. Emotional primacy remains critical. Hypergamy amplified by tech. Safety and security even more necessary. Dual mating strategy still present, subtly. Social influence now includes digital spheres. Fantasy and narrative dominates online sexual expression. The laws do not disappear. They adapt, often faster than we can keep up consciously. Conclusion: navigating tomorrow with ancient wisdom. Understanding the fundamental laws of women's sexual nature is not about resisting change or clinging to tradition. It's about having a map, so as the landscape shifts, we still know how to move. The future of sexual dynamics will be faster, more fluid, and more complex. But the underlying patterns remain tied to human biology, evolutionary psychology, and emotional truth. If we want to build satisfying, real relationships in the digital age, we must learn to see the difference between the noise and the signal. The noise is everything new. The signal is everything timeless. This book has aimed to reveal the signal. Conclusion: seeing the unseen, the pattern beneath the pulse. Over the course of this book, we've journeyed through the biological, psychological, emotional, and social forces that shape female sexual behavior. We've explored how deep instincts interact with modern realities, how what's ancient still pulses beneath what's contemporary. The result is not chaos, but a constellation of laws that, while not absolute, are reliably present across individual differences and cultural boundaries. These 12 fundamental laws reveal that women's sexuality is not random, fickle, or irrational. It is responsive, adaptive, and deeply intelligent. It reflects survival strategies honed by evolution, refined by culture, and filtered through personal experience. At times it seeks safety. At others, stimulation. It responds to emotion more than logic, to signals more than declarations, to the story more than the script. Reframing misunderstanding. Much confusion, conflict, and heartache between men and women, within relationships, and even within women themselves, comes from misinterpreting this nature. What may seem like mixed signals is often multi-layered signaling. What is dismissed as inconsistency is often context-sensitive adaptation. What is judged as shallow or disloyal is frequently the unconscious drive for emotional or genetic security. By understanding these fundamental laws, we move from frustration to insight, from manipulation to cooperation, from judgment to compassion. A summary of the 12 laws. Let's briefly revisit the 12 laws we've covered. 1. Law of emotional primacy. Emotional context is the gateway to arousal and connection. 2. Law of selective desire. Women tend to filter partners with more caution and complexity. 3. Law of social influence. External approval often colors internal attraction. 4. Law of peak fertility. Risk-taking. Fertile windows trigger bolder sexual impulses. 5. Law of dual mating strategy. Women may unconsciously seek different men for security versus arousal. 6. Law of sexual fluidity. Attraction in women can be more adaptable and situation-dependent. 7. Law of long-term hypergamy. Women are instinctively drawn toward upward mate selection. 8. Law of emotional memory. Past emotional bonds remain imprinted and influential. 9. Law of social signaling. Sexual choices can reflect identity, rebellion, or status. 10. Law of safety and security. A sense of emotional and physical safety is often a prerequisite for desire. 11. Law of fantasy and narrative. Erotic response is fueled by imagination and story. 12. Law of hormonal influence on mate preference. Subtle hormonal shifts shape attraction and mood. The power of case studies. Throughout the book, you've read real-life use cases, scenarios that bring these laws to life. These are not just anecdotes. They're windows into how women make sense of their desire in real time, what they wrestle with, what they crave, what they suppress, and what they eventually act upon. The stories may differ in detail, but they echo a shared rhythm, a rhythm shaped by these laws. Where we go from here. This book is not a manual for control. It is not a weapon for blame or justification. It is a mirror for reflection, a lens for empathy, and a roadmap for more honest communication between the sexes. For women, this understanding is a liberation. To know your own nature is to stop fighting it, and instead, work with it in a conscious, empowered way. For men, it offers clarity. Instead of guessing or resenting what you don't understand, you can begin to see patterns and respond with maturity and insight. For both, it opens the door to healthier relationships, where attraction, trust, and compatibility can be built on a deeper foundation than assumptions or outdated myths. Final case study: the woman who finally understood herself. Consider Sarah, a 39-year-old executive who cycled through relationships that all began with fire and ended with fatigue. She blamed herself for losing interest, shamed herself for being too emotional, and resented her inability to feel passion with good men. After learning about the laws, especially emotional primacy, fantasy and narrative, and dual mating strategy, she began to reframe her patterns. She realized she needed emotional stimulation, story, and polarity, not just safety. With this insight, she didn't just choose different partners, she related to herself differently. That is the power of understanding the laws. You don't just decode others, you start decoding yourself. Closing thought. Desire is not a flaw. It's a language. The better we understand its grammar, the more fluently we can speak it, with honesty, with care, and with confidence.